all, we would like to say thank you very much to the God of Almighty has given us His blessing, opportunity, and good health until we can gather to presentation our material today. Salawat and salam, let's Ali Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who has bring us from the. So we would like to say thank you very much for the lecturer who has given us this group assignment. So before we are going to presentation our material today, allow us to introduce ourselves first, and it starts with me. My name is Sanaria, and my registration number is A1M2 20022. So the member of my group is Nurul Pratiwi, Annisa Sulaiman, Rayani Pertiwi, Yulyanti Hartini, Ode Asi Sandi, Risniyanti, Ode Nurul Awalin, and Siska Amelia. Okay, our material today about ethics and public speaking. When we want to deliver our arguments through public speaking, we have to have ethics to deliver our arguments. So let's start to the definition of ethics and public speaking. Ethics is the branch of philosophy that deals with issues of right and wrong in human affairs. So, what is the definition of public speaking actually? Public speaking is process, an act, and an art for expressing thoughts, but we have to be able to changing emotions, actions, attitudes, and make the audience move by the words and touched by the meaning of what the speakers say. From both of the situation, from both of the definition, we can take the conclusion that public speaking has a close relationship with ethics. So that's all of the opening of me. Now we are moving to the second speaker. The second speaker is Risniyanti. Risniyanti, time and place is yours.
Okay, let me introduce myself. My name is Risniyanti. My ID student number A1M2 20020. Right in here, I will explain the material about the importance of ethics. Okay, what is ethics? When you think of ethics, what comes to mind? Perhaps you think of words and phrases such as ethical behavior, professional ethics, ethics boards, or code of ethics. At its heart, ethics refers to the concept of having morally acceptable values and behaviors. When you align your behaviors and actions with these values, you engage in ethical behavior. Ethical behavior in public speaking. Why will you need to even consider ethics in public speaking? First and foremost, your audience not only needs to believe in your words and messages, but they need to trust you as the message giver. To engage in unethical behavior when speaking only erodes that trust. There are other reasons to engage in ethical behavior in public speaking. The first, to maintain your credibility and reputation. The second, to present a fair and accurate argument of your thesis. The third, to provide honest facts with integrity and without deception or distortion. And the last, to abide by shared or common moral values and beliefs. Next. To speak ethical is to use your own original speech content. If you use any substantiating fact or passage from another, you must give appropriate attribution or credit as necessary. Ethical speakers are ones who do not plagiarize their material or try to pass off words and ideas from others as their own. Ethical speakers do not deceive their audience. It can also be stated that ethical speakers do not distort or worse page, or worse yet, discuss opinions as page in order to argue their thesis or make their point. Acknowledging and responding to conflict of interest is also regarded as ethical public speaking behavior. There may be times where you may be asked to speak on behalf of a certain topic in which you have a professional interest or might benefit from financially. In those instances, the ethical speaker will either excuse him or herself from speaking. If unable to do so, he or she may simple disclose the nature of the conflict of interest so that everyone is on the same page. The study of ethics, then, is incredibly important to any student of public speaking, as the most effective public speakers are those who practice ethical behavior in their well, thanks. That's
Okay, thank you very much for the second speaker. Now we are moving to the third speaker. The third speaker is Siska Amelia. Siska Amelia, time and place is yours.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity that has been given to me. My name is Siska Amelia S. My registration number is A1M220024. Okay, when we talk about the importance of ethics, any question? Why is communication ethics important? Communication ethics important because helps humans to freely, but can be facilitated. Ethics is the subject of moral autonomy, which are made of morality. In society, their values also written. People can use between good and bad. This is of ethics in communication, lectures, and to others. And ethics to necessary in human because basically every human being wants to be respected by each other. Humans instinctively want to have a good image of others. For the reason humans need ethics. And importantly, with reason why ethics are so important. First, ethical is the first mentally physical. Second, ethics reflects for others. Third, ethics is easier for us to be accepted. Four, by maintain good relation with for a long time and fails and knowledge develop easily. Letters.
Okay, thank you very much for the third speaker. Now we are invite the first speaker. The first speaker is Nur Annisa Sulaiman. Nur Annisa Sulaiman, time and place is yours.
Okay, thank you to the moderator. Before that, I will introduce myself. My name is Nurul Sulaiman with student ID A1M2200 and 16. And I will read my material that is Good Lies for Ethical Speaking. Number one, make sure your goal ethical public 5 minutes presentation to your classmates or co-workers. Ethical public speaking is the process. This process begins when you begin brainstorming the topic of your speech. Every time you plan to speak to an audience, whether it's at a formal speaking event or an impromptu pitch at your workplace, you have ethical responsibilities to fulfill. The two most important aspects in ethical communication include your ability to remain honest while avoiding plagiarism and to set and meet responsible speech goals. As with other ethical issues, there can be gray areas when it comes to assessing a speaker's goals, areas in which reasonable people with well-defined standard of right and wrong can legitimately disagree. But this is not a reason to avoid asking ethical questions. If you are to be a responsible public speaker, you cannot escape assessing the ethical soundness of your goals. Next slide, please. Number two, be fully prepared for each speech. Effective speakers are those who take the time to fully prepare their speech. Very clothes they wear for the speech. If you don't prepare, it will show and ultimately affect your credibility as a speaker to your audience and colleagues. Respect your audience by taking time to write, edit, review, and rehearse your speech before presenting. 3. Be honest in what you say. Nothing is more important to ethical speak making than honesty. Public speaker rests on the unspoken assumption that words can be trusted and people will be truthful. Without this assumption, there is no basis from communication, no reason for one person to believe anything that another person says. Does this mean every speaker must always tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? We can all think of situations in which this is impossible because we don't know the whole truth, or inadvisable because it will be tactless or imprudent. Consider a parent who tells his two-year-old daughter that her searching violin solo is beautiful, or a speaker who telling a falsehood in circumstances when disclosing the truth might touch of mob violence. Few people will find this action unethical. Okay, that's all from me. I will return into moderator. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Nur Annisa Sulaiman. Now we are moving to the next speaker. The next speaker is Yulyanti Hartini. Yulyanti Hartini, time and place is yours.
Okay, thank you for moderator. Let introduce myself. My name is Yulyanti Hartini. My register number A1M22002. I will continue the presentation of material about avoid name calling and other forms of abusive language. Calling name and personal dignity. Name calling is the use of language to defame, demean, or demean in individual or group. These terms have been used to demean people because of their sexual orientation, religious belief, or ethnic background. For now, the thing to remember is contrary to the opinion of some, avoiding racism, sexism, and other types of abusive language isn't just about political correctness. Calling name and talking free. Name calling and abusive language also pose ethical problems in public speaking when they are used to silence an opponent's voice. As a public speaker, you have an ethical obligation to help preserve the right by avoiding tactics such and name calling that inherently dubs or, or respecting public statement made by group or individuals who voice opinions that differ from yours. Okay, thank you. I will return to moderator.
Okay, thank you very much for the fifth speaker. Now we are moving to the next speaker. The next speaker is Nurul Pratiwi. Nurul Pratiwi, time and place is yours.
Okay, thank you, moderator. Introduce myself. My name is Nurul Pratiwi with student ID number E1M2200018. Yes, I explain about the material about plagiarism. For definition, plagiarism comes from plagiarism. The Latin word for kidnapper to plagiarize means to present another person's language, or it is as your own to give the impression you have written or took something yourself when you have actually taken from someone else. We often think of plagiarism as an ethical issue in the classroom, but it can have repercussions in other citizens. First, global plagiarism. Global plagiarism is stealing your speech entirely from another source and passing it off as your own. The most blatant and unforgivable kind of plagiarism, it is grossly unethical. Global plagiarism in college classroom usually occurs because a student put off the assignment until the last minute. Then at edge of desperation, the student downloads a speech from the internet or gets one written by friends and delivers it as his or her own. The best way to avoid this, of course, is not to leave your speech until the last minute. Most teachers explain speech assignment for enough in advance that you should have to trouble getting an early start. By starting early, you will give yourself plenty of time to prepare a first-rate speech, a speech of your own. If for some reason you fail to get your speech ready on time, do not succumb to the lure of plagiarism. Whatever penalty you suffer for being late will pale in comparison with the consequences if you are caught plagiarizing. 2. Patchwork plagiarism. Unlike global plagiarism, in which a speaker parrots an entire speech from a single source, patchwork plagiarism occurs when a speaker pilfers from 2 or 3 sources. As with global plagiarism, one key to averting patchwork plagiarism is to start working on your speech as soon as possible. The longer you work in it, the more apt you come with your own approach. It is also vital you consult a larger number of sources in your search. If you have only on the 3 sources, you are far more likely to fall into the trap of patchwork plagiarism than if you consult a wide range of resource material. Okay, thank you. I return to the moderator.
Okay, thank you very much for Nurul Pratiwi. Now we are moving to the next speaker. The next speaker is Rayani Pertiwi. Rayani Pertiwi, time and place is yours.
Thank you for the chance that given to me. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Rayani Pertiwi, and now I would like to present about incremental plagiarism and the internet. First is incremental plagiarism. In global plagiarism and patchwork plagiarism, the entire speech is scraped more or less verbatim from single source or a few sources. But plagiarism can exist even when the speech as a whole is not parodied. This is called incremental plagiarism. It occurs when the speaker fails to give credit for particular parts, increments of the speech that are borrowed from other people. The most important of these increments are quotations and paraphrases. Quotations. Whenever you quote someone directly, you must attribute the words to that person. Paraphrases. When you paraphrase an author, you restate or summarize her or his ideas in your own words. Suppose that your topic is Malcolm X, but this time you decide to paraphrase the statement from Bruce Perry's biography rather than quoting it. You might say, Malcolm X was not a politician. He did not pass any laws or win any Supreme Court victories or get elected to any office. But he stated the grievances and anger of his followers so powerfully that the whole nation took notice. Even though you do not quote Perry directly, you still appropriate the structure of his ideas and a fair amount of his language. Thus, you still need to give him credit just as if you were repeating his words verbatim. There are 2 ways to guard against incremental plagiarism. The first is to be careful when taking research notes to distinguish among direct quotations, paraphrase material, and your own comments. The second way to avoid incremental plagiarism is to err on the side of caution. In other words, when in doubt, cite your source. Next is plagiarism and the internet. When it comes to plagiarism, no subject poses more confusion or more temptation than the internet, because it's so easy to copy information from the web. Many people are not aware of the need to cite sources when they use internet materials in their speech. If you don't cite internet sources, you are just guilty of plagiarism as if you take information from print sources without proper citation. One way to avoid patchwork plagiarism or incremental plagiarism when working with internet is to take careful research notes. Make sure you keep a record of the following: 1. The title of the internet document. 2. The author or organization responsible for the document. 3. The date on which the document was last updated. And 4. The date on which you access the site. You will need all this information for your speech bibliography. You will also need to identify your internet sources when you present the speech. It's not enough to say as I found on the web or according to internet. You need to specify the author and website. In Chapter 8, we will look more closely at how to cite internet documents. For now, keep in mind that providing such citations is one of your ethical responsibilities as a public speaker. Another problem with regard to the internet is the large number of websites that sell entire speech or papers. In addition to being highly unethical, using material from one of these sites is extremely risky. I think that is all from me. I return to the moderator. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, dear Rayani. Now we are moving to the next speaker. The next speaker is Ode Awalin. Ode Awalin. Place is yours.
Okay, thank you moderator. I will continue about guidelines for ethical listening. Jadi panduan atau mendengarkan. Jadi ketika kita mendengarkan public speaking itu ada etika untuk mendengarkan. Okay, first, be curious and attentive. Jadi harus sopan dan penuh perhatian. So far in this chapter, we have a cues on the ethical that is of public speakers. But speech making is not a one-way street. Listeners also have ethical obligation. Jadi pendengar juga itu memiliki kewajiban etis ketika mereka mendengarkan public speaking. Apa saja? First, to listen courteously and attentively. Jadi mendengarkan dengan sopan dan penuh perhatian. 2, to avoid prejudging the speaker, and 3, to maintain the free and open expression of ideas. Let us look at this. Ayo kita lihat bagaimana gambarannya. So guys, to make you understand, I will try to invite you to image this situation. Coba bayangkan situasi berikut ini ketika Anda membawakan public speaking di depan kelas. Bayangkan atau image that you are giving your first classroom speech. You have put a great deal of time into writing the speech. Kamu sudah menulis apa-apa persiapan ketika public speaking di depan kelas, and you have practiced your delivery until you are confident you can do well, especially once you get over the initial rush of stage fright. You have worked hard on your introduction. Kamu sudah cukup kerja keras untuk public speaking. Kamu sudah mempersiapkan semuanya, and your speech get off to a fine start. Persiapannya sudah bagus dan kamu bisa memulai public speaking dengan permulaan yang baik. Most of your classmates are paying just attention, but some are not. Tapi teman kelasmu ada yang memperhatikan, ada yang tidak memperhatikan. You try to block them out of your mind. Kamu coba abaikan mereka, especially since the rest of the class seems interested in what I'm saying. But the longer you speak, the most concerned you become. What I'm doing wrong? You wonder to yourself, how can I get these people to pay attention? Meskipun kamu sudah berusaha, ada yang memperhatikan, ada yang tidak memperhatikan, dan itu mengganggu konsentrasimu ketika public speaking. The more you think about this, the more your confidence and concentration waver. Semakin kamu pikirkan, saya salahnya di mana ya? Malah itu mengganggu konsentrasimu ketika public speaking. It is an unpleasant condition for the speaker when starting public speaking. Jadi itu menunjukkan bahwa saat kondisi yang tidak baik, saat public speaking, pendengar tidak fokus, itu dapat mengganggu orang yang melakukan public speaking. And that's because listeners don't show ethic when listening to public speaking. Dan itu karena para pendengar atau listenernya tidak menunjukkan etika saat mendengarkan public speaking. This proves that being a good listener when someone is doing public speaking is more important. So, what about good listeners? What should a good listener understand when someone do public speaking? Okay, I have written in this PowerPoint. Jadi apa sih yang harus dilakukan oleh pendengar? Apa etika yang harus dilakukan pendengar saat seseorang melakukan public speaking? Apa yang harusnya dilakukan? Just as public speakers have an ethical obligation to prepare fully for each speech, so listeners have a responsibility to be courteous and attentive during the speech. Dan jadi pendengar juga itu memiliki kewajiban untuk mendengarkan orang yang melakukan public speaking dengan seksama dan juga bertanggung jawab. This responsibility, which is a matter of civility and circumstance, is especially important in speech class. You and your classmates are in learning situation in which you need to support one another. That's all my material. Thank you for your attention. Back to moderator. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ode Nurul Awalin. Now we are moving to the last speaker. The last speaker is Ode Asi Sandi. Ode Asi Sandi, time and place is yours.
Okay, thank you for moderator. I will continue the goodness for ethical listening material. Okay, my name is Ode Asi Sandi with my student ID number A1M220028 from class B. To avoid prejudging the speaker, we have heard that you can judge a book by its cover. The same is true of speeches. You can judge a speech by the name, race, lifestyle, appearance, a reputation of the speaker. As the National Communication Association states in its credo for ethical communication, listeners should strive to understand and respect speakers before evaluating and responding to their message. This does not mean you must agree with every speaker you hear. Your aim is to listen carefully to the speaker's ideas, to ask the evidence and reason offered in support of those ideas, and to reach an intelligent judgment about the speech. 3. Maintain the free and open expression of ideas. As we saw earlier in this chapter, a democratic society depends on this free and open expression of ideas. The right of free expression is so important that is protected by the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which declares in part that Congress shall make to law abridging the freedom of speech, just as public speakers need to avoid name calling and other tactics that can undermine free speech. So listeners have an obligation to maintain the right of speakers to the heard. That's all the material conveyed. I returned it to the moderator.
Okay, thank you very much for Ode Asi Sandi. Now all the material we have delivered. So in our presentation today, we take the summary or the conclusion. Public speaking is a form of power. It carries with it heavy ethical responsibilities, because the good person speaking will remain the ideal of commendable speech making. There are 5 basic guidelines for ethical public speaking. The first is to make sure your goals are ethically sound, that they are consistent with the welfare fair of society and your audience. The second is to be fully prepared for each speech. The third is to be honest in what you say. The fourth is to avoid name calling and other forms of abusive language. And the final guidelines is to put the ethical principles into practice at all times. Of all the ethical lapses speakers can commit, few are more serious than plagiarism. Global plagiarism is lifting a speech. Global plagiarism is lifting a speech entirely from a single source. Patchwork plagiarism involves stitching a speech together by copying from a few sources. Incremental plagiarism occurs when a speaker fails to give credit for specific quotations and paraphrases that are borrowed from other people. In addition to your ethical responsibilities as a speaker, you have ethical obligations as a listener. The first is to listen courteously and attentively. The second is to avoid prejudicing the speakers. The third is to support the free and open expression of ideas. In all these ways, your speech class will offer a good testing ground for questions of ethical responsibility. So, that's all our material today about ethics and public speaking. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.